Sherlock Holmes starts as a story in a British magazine in 1887. It's the beginning of an iconic literary character, but more importantly, it begins a new way of looking at crime and justice. With the tools of their craft, an artist can create a colorful world, bringing the images of their imagination to life. This silhouette is unmistakable, but it's not the hat and pipe that illuminates his world. It's logic and reason. Sherlock Holmes has inspired more than 100 movies, all based on the novels by Arthur Conan Doyle.
Bought my first Sherlock Holmes book with my book money at 10 years old.
Now that Sherlock's entered the public domain, there are sure to be more. Not bad for a character who is arrogant, unfriendly, and more than a century old. Why so successful? Perhaps because crime permeates every culture and era.
I think what really set Sherlock Holmes apart was the fact that there was this incredible attention to detail.
Logic and reason may be universal concepts, but it's Sherlock Holmes who is the first to use it to unravel mysteries.
He really started that whole concept of criminology.
And while crime may be universal, humanity's yearning for justice is timeless. Sherlock Holmes is not just entertaining the public, he's inspiring them to follow his lead.
For me, Sherlock Holmes is justice. He represents justice.
You'll accompany us, Mr. Holmes.
I'd like to very much, Dr. Mortimer, but unfortunately I have some rather pressing business here in London.
Arthur Conan Doyle is 27 when he creates the first Sherlock Holmes story, which appears in a magazine in 1887, A Study in Scarlet.
I took it home and I read it and I was hooked. I went back the next week and bought the whole Reader's Digest series as it came out. Like his brother Mycroft was lazy. He never left his room.
Right.
Dr. Carlina de la Cova is part of a Sherlock Holmes discussion group, The Hounds of the Baskerville, with friends Al Shaw and Dino Argyropoulos.
Just to be someone who studies bones and identifies bones, you have to know what they look like.
Dr. de la Cova is an anthropologist who teaches a Sherlock Holmes class at the University of South Carolina.
I often argue that Sherlock Holmes was an anthropologist. He knows that people can assess an individual based on how their skull looks or what happened to them through life. You can see that they have a defect, a perfectly round defect.
The fact that he saw things beyond just a dead body, let's round up the usual suspects, that really influenced criminal investigation, and the public, I think, began to expect more from the police department. The police department started getting more involved in scientific investigation.
As Sherlock Holmes captivates London, a real-life serial killer emerges. Using poison, he kills 10 people, mostly women, including 2 in Chicago. The murderer? A doctor, Thomas Neal Cream. As London police try to figure it all out, the fictional Sherlock Holmes uses science to solve crimes on the printed page.
He kind of expanded how police look at certain subjects. It's interesting that a novelist would give policemen clues on how to look at a case. His impact as a character pretty much opened up the idea of the private detective and how somebody who has a certain twist of intelligence can figure this all out.
Detective stories, both fact and fiction, captivate Victorian England. Dr. Thomas Neal Cream is captured, convicted, and hanged in 1892. Strangely enough, he crossed paths in Scotland with Arthur Conan Doyle years earlier when they were both pursuing a medical degree. In fact, Doyle's inspiration for Sherlock Holmes comes from a doctor, Doyle's professor, Dr. Joseph Bell.
Dr. Bell was an internist who did that. He would be able to see somebody and tell them what was wrong with them and what they did for a living just by observing. And Doyle used that as Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes inspires a girl named Frances Glessner from a wealthy family in this beautiful home in Chicago.
This started to develop her mind, I think, for mystery and investigation.
Bill Tyre is the executive director of the Glessner home.
It could be a thread from a piece of upholstery in a chair that solves the crime. So it wasn't obvious. You really had to think about it, and that's what I think she loved.
Frances Glessner becomes known as the mother of forensic science. She establishes a Department of Legal Medicine at Harvard, and in 1943 she becomes the first female police captain in the United States. She creates the nutshell studies of unexplained death, dioramas that depict real-life crime to help train police officers.
I think it really reveals her creative mind. And so she was able to use that and combine it with her interest in death scene investigation, and it was a perfect combination. So this is an exact copy of one of the nutshell studies.
And why do they call it nutshell?
So there was an old police saying, clear the innocent, convict the guilty, and find the truth in a nutshell. And because she was working in a miniature scale, it seemed the perfect analogy. So in the models, the idea was not to solve what happened. It was merely to hone your skills of an observation. One of the things she felt very strongly about was that every person deserved equal treatment. If a wealthy person dies, there's a whole lot of investigation. If somebody dies in the gutter on the street, they deserve that same level of respect.
Frances Glessner follows Sherlock Holmes' lead, but author Arthur Conan Doyle seems to lose his way. In 1919, two girls reveal photographs of fairies, and they captivate England, including Doyle.
Someone had played games with double exposure and had some fairies in the woods, and he bought into it.
He's convinced this is real evidence of the supernatural and writes about it in this magazine. Once an author of a critical thinking detective, Doyle is now a spiritualist like his wife. They're convinced their friend Harry Houdini's magic is real, not just a trick. To convince Houdini of the supernatural, they hold a seance to contact the magician's deceased mother. During the seance, Doyle's wife claims to speak to her.
So she was speaking for the mother, and she said, Harry, we miss you, and we love you, and all that stuff. And afterwards, Houdini said, well, my mother couldn't speak English, and she never called me Harry.
Nevertheless, Doyle turns to writing about spiritualism.
He had lost his first wife. He was devastated by that. He lost his son in the war. And during this time period, I think if your grief is so much, they turned to spiritualism to try and rekindle that contact with their loved ones out of some hope for that.
He sees writing about spiritualism as a more worthy endeavor than murder mysteries. Despite pleas from his own mother, Doyle kills Sherlock Holmes when the detective plunges over a waterfall.
And now he's gone. The public went into an uproar about it because Holmes is dead. Then Conan Doyle was forced to bring him back by not only popular demand, but by money. Spiritualism doesn't pay a lot. So he was stuck having to write more stories.
He resurrects the series by creating The Hounds of Baskerville. It's a prequel, thus Sherlock Holmes is still alive. Ultimately, Doyle explains Sherlock just faked his death.
Off the ledge. Ready?
Ready.
There you go. There's one.
So that's the general pattern you see when you look at your fingers. You'll see if it has a loop or a pocket in the middle.
In the Sherlock Holmes novels, the public becomes familiar with the concept of using fingerprints as a clue. It's widely accepted for more than a century, but Dr. De La Cova says more recent scientific study reveals it's not as definitive as we once thought. That too is the legacy of Sherlock Holmes. He put a face on science, an endeavor that is self-correcting. As our technology changes and gives us more information, science follows the evidence in pursuit of justice, inspired by a character of one man's imagination.
He is certainly a cultural icon in many ways. You can't pass a silhouette of a guy smoking a pipe and not think Sherlock Holmes.